Hello, everybody. Thank you for checking in. Let me start by saying that today it is like Hanoi hot out. Hanoi hot. At 11 o'clock, it was like 102. And that's absolutely ridiculous as far as I'm concerned, which pretty much keeps me inside. I did take the Fiata out for a run early this morning, and it was magnificent. We went down to the beach, kind of drove around a little bit. It was more about the journey, not the destination. And then I came back home before I thought it would be too hot, but by the time I got back, it's freaking hot. So what I wanted to share today was, and now I don't, where did I put that all important, where'd that go? That's critical to this. The whole story is hinged on that, and I've lost it, so now I have to go find it. What do I do with it? I found it. Very critical, super important to my story. Sorry for the blur, but needless to say, I've been drinking. And I've also been working on my Lego typewriter. Check this out. Now, it's going to take me the rest of my life to build, but I got to admit, it's pretty cool. Hopefully you can see that. There's 11 bags of crap, and I'm on this is bag 1 through 3 so far. Pretty cool. Little side note, it'll probably take me another series of Saturdays. Maybe I'll work on it some more today, and time will tell. What am I drinking here? Templeton Barrel Strength. Very good. Give it a try. Anyway, so let's go back 30 years. So it's the early 1990s, and I have notes because I've been drinking. It's the early 1990s, 91, 92, 93, the early 90s, 30 years ago. Late 88, the Soviet Union is starting to collapse, right? By 1991, countries like Ukraine, Armenia, Estonia, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, a lot of stands, along with Ukraine, Armenia, Estonia, Germany, lots changing. These are all becoming independent countries and stuff again. I just mentioned that basically Russia or the Soviet Union gives up Eastern Germany, and Germany is able to join back together the first time since 1945. There's the Monica Lewinsky scandal, the LA riots. For those of you old enough will remember that several policemen beat the shit out of Rodney King. We had riots and a trial. The breakup of Yugoslavia happened in the early 90s. Sorry, Branimir. The grunge scene, bands like Nirvana, STP, Hole, Tad, Soundgarden, Pearl Jam, Bush, all came out about this time. And one thing that's sort of interesting, in 1993, Disney announces their plans to open a new theme park in Virginia. They're going to call it Disney America. Disney America. It's going to cost $650 million, which is about $1 billion or so in today's dollars. Probably a little bit more. And it was going to open in 1998, so 5 years after this announcement. At that time, the CEO was Micheal Eisner. You guys, most of you know who he is. Rumor has it he got the idea when he was on a vacation or a visit to Colonial Williamsburg. So Disney quietly started buying land in Haymarket, Virginia. They acquired, I think, about 600 acres up to that point, and had options to buy up to another 3,000 or 4,000. Again, just quietly sort of amassing this property with plans to build this theme park. And the plan was to have the park itself was going to be about 185 acres, and it was just off Interstate 66, again in Haymarket, Virginia. And I imagine the other land that they were purchasing would have been for hotels, similar to Disney World, for those who have been there, to create a bubble to which once you drove into Haymarket, you could exist in that Disney bubble for as long as you wanted to. Now, at the time, the Haymarket Historical Society or Historical Commission, local government, mayors, governors, all those cats were actually very, very enthused about the idea and concept. And I'm, they're not foolish. From an economic standpoint, they estimated it was going to bring in like 2,000 jobs and $50 million in tax revenue annually. That was right out of the gate. That wouldn't be now. It would be, $100 million, well, maybe not $100 million, but $75 million in taxes annually to a place that, quite frankly, most of us have never heard of or give a crap about. Its biggest issue, and where the controversy lies, is a handful of very wealthy folks felt that it was a little too close to the Manassas National Battlefield Memorial Park. And I believe this is the second, after Gettysburg, this is the second most famous battlefield. Now, to be honest, I've never heard of it until I did a little reading, but that shouldn't mean a whole lot. I tend not to dwell on past battlefields too much. But it was about 5 to 8 miles. Haymarket is about 5 to 8 miles from this memorial park. And as I was saying, a lot of wealthy folks, cats like David McCullough, James McPherson, Arthur Schlesinger, John Franklin, and a number of others were really, really opposed to the idea. And all those cats have one thing in common, well, two things in common, and I'll let you figure out what those are. But they felt that this park, that Disney, they weren't opposed to a park sort of celebrating America's past. They weren't opposed to the park in general. They were just sort of opposed to its location, which is fair enough, I guess. But the thing that I thought was so funny is they felt it would desecrate the ground that the Revolutionary soldiers fought on, a couple hundred years ago. And that would just desecrate that ground. And they also argued that the park would bring these horrible things like gas stations, restaurants, the horror, restaurants, a Chili's in our town, hotels, obviously, and strip malls, which I would have to agree with strip malls. But based on my experience with Disney, it would have been a bubble. And Disney tends to have, if they've got control of it like Walt Disney World, unlike Disneyland and Anaheim, the surrounding area is pretty much within their control once they get inside that bubble. But those cats opposed it so much, just so much, and beat Disney and Eisner and the team up so badly. They said things like it would somehow, that Disney would lessen slavery and lessen the Civil War or the revolutionary folks in some way, which I think is kind of interesting, and it might be a little silly because at the end, Disney is basically for children, myself included. But I don't see it as, they're not changing history, they're not trying to lessen, but if Disney's for kids, this could be their first introduction into the Civil War, their first introduction into the industrialization of America or slavery, done so in a soft, less harsh way when you're 6 or 7 years old. We don't, just like when you explain where babies come from, we don't give them the details. It's mommy and daddy love each other, right? And then a baby comes along. We don't get into the gory details until later. I kind of feel it would be the same way. But regardless of all of that, those cats that I mentioned were successful. And in 1994, Disney abandoned the plan and they sold off that property that they had purchased and relinquished the option to buy on that remaining land. Now, what I find hilarious is today, that land, that very land that we're talking about, has over 10,000 homes and apartments on it. And you'll never guess what comes along with homes and apartments. Gas stations, restaurants. Instead of nice hotels, they're Motel 6s and Motel 8s. Strip malls, fast food joints, the horror. David McCullough must be just rolling over in his bed. But the land ended up good. They built houses. Just a few years later, they just started building houses, much to everyone's chagrin. I guess Mr. McCullough and his team didn't have a problem with that, which I find interesting. I wonder if he had any investments in, I don't know who the developers were, but something I need to look into. But I thought you kind of find that interesting, that in the end, the very thing that they feared the most, gas stations and hotels, ended up being built there. But the reason I bring that up and why I had to interrupt the video is I came across a brochure for Disney's America. and I wanted to share it with you. I thought this was kind of interesting and kind of rare. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I'll give you a detail here in a second. I'll turn the camera around and kind of show you what it looks like. It's sort of a, what is this, a 3-page sort of fold out, which I'm sure they handed out to folks in the community to sort of show them the plan. And the reality is it wasn't too far from Washington, D.C., so folks who were traveling to the nation's capital to visit the capital could also come down here and learn a little something for their smaller children. Again, it's not a hardcore history lesson. It's a partnership. And I don't think anybody can argue that Disney does a good job on some things. I'll show you some details in a second. But some of the lands and arenas would be things like Crossroads, USA, which would be like a Civil War era sort of village. And that would be the hub where steam trains of the late 1880s or mid 1880s, I guess, would exist. To give you that sense and feel of the 1880s, why you'd want to go back to the 1880s. They didn't have toothpaste, for Christ's sake. Native America land, although that's my saying, it was probably called Indian America back then. But it would be, the 1600s to the 1800s, and you'd have Indian villages, and they would have rides like the Lewis and Clark ride, which, interestingly enough, was going to be a whitewater raft ride, which is basically what Grizzly Peak is in DCA. So I think they took that concept and just recycled it into Disney's California Adventure. President's Square, which if you've been to Walt Disney World, they basically have that there, where all the presidents, much like Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln, for those of you not been to Walt Disney World, there's a room you go into, or a theater, a cathedral, and all the presidents from Washington through, well, when I was there, it was President Trump, but he was the last to speak, and I would presume now it's Biden. It's actually amazing and just really interesting, which only reinforces the idea McCullough and his team never had a problem with that crap for kids to sort of see, and it was a nice, none of the presidents are disparaged in any way, they're the presidents, but they seem to have a real hard-on for the project itself, saying that somehow it would desecrate. How does the animatronics in President's Hall desecrate the presidents? It doesn't. It's for kids. It introduces them to things. It might spark their imagination, or they may want to look something up for heaven's sake. Because we all know where information's hidden, right? In books. Crack one. Anyway, so President's Square, which again became the Hall of Presidents in Walt Disney World, or would have been similar to Walt Disney World Hall of Presidents. The Civil War Fort, which would have recreated, I don't know how they would have done this, but some Civil War battles. For some reason, as a society, we're all obsessed with recreating these battles. But I think people seem to forget that in these battles, lives are lost. But anyway, a Civil War fort type battle. A land called Enterprise, which would have focused on the late 1800s through the 1930s, which would have been the Industrial Revolution, sort of a factory town. I think it would have had a roller coaster, which again, I think probably became California Screamin for DCA, I'm not sure. There would have been a land, We the People, sort of this Ellis Island themed, families coming in and becoming part of the American experience. There would have been a state fair land, which would have focused on the Midwest and farming. Probably wouldn't have gone to that land. But anyway, I would have had some Coney Island stuff maybe, which, hey, if they partner with Nathan's Hot Dog, get a Nathan's Hot Dog at a fake Coney's Island, that wouldn't be too bad. If you ever had Nathan's Hot Dog, that's a good hot dog. Victory Field, which would have focused on World War I and II. And I believe that's probably where Soarin in both DCA, Disney's California Adventure, and I think Soarin's in Epcot and in Florida. I think that's this Disney's America was the genesis for that idea. It probably would have been, instead of soaring over California or soaring over the world, you would have been in a P-51 Mustang, the Cadillac of the sky, shooting Germans. Anyway, those are some of the proposed rides and things of that nature. But right now I'm going to do a little zoom in on, again, this sort of brochure. I'm not sure what this would be called, but it even says here, for more information, please contact Disney's America at 703-368-3733. 3657. I wonder if that's still a good number. But this is part of my Disney memorabilia and collection. I think it's somewhat rare and unique. I don't know for sure. They probably printed 1 million of these and they're easy to come by. But I've got one. So anyway, take a look. Here's sort of a close-up of it. So there she is, the pamphlet, Disney's America. Again, as I mentioned, I think these are pretty hard to find, or, well, maybe not, I found it, but obviously produced in the early 90s. Give you sort of a taste of what this pamphlet looked like. There's the projected land, I guess, as a whole, not counting the hotels and retail environment. And again, as I talked about before, here are the potential lands. Crossroads USA, the hotel accommodations within Crossroads USA, which I guess I didn't mention, but there you have it. President Square, Native America, 1600 to 1810. The Civil War Fort, very exciting, 1850 to 1870. We the People, 1870 to 1930. Enterprise, 1870 to 1930. Victory Field, 1930 to 1945. The State Fair, 30 to 45. And the Family Farm. But again, you can kind of see the, what would you call this? The plans for the various pavilions and lands. But conceptual site plan, that's what you'd call it. But they went so far as to spend a tremendous sum of money on producing this pamphlet. It's a shame, I think, that it didn't come to being, but these things happen. But I wanted to share this pamphlet with you because, again, I might be wrong, but I think this is kind of rare. I don't think this is something you can just get anywhere. But I've got one. And again, there's the cover. Here's the back side. Obviously, we want to keep the community happy. And I think it's hilarious that this site now is full of homes, strip malls. I bet there's Chick-fil-A's and what's that ridiculous chicken strip place, Cane's, on every corner. So they ended up getting exactly what they feared most, and they lost out on all that tax revenue because who the hell wants to go to Virginia anyway, right? Anyway, that's the pamphlet. I hope you got a kick out of this video. I had fun making it. As always, in this world, when you could be anything you want, you be kind, you be humble, you be forgiving, be melting snow, and remember, try to have a little fun. It's later than you think. Bye-bye. All right, I already gave my closing. You saw it. I think that's a pretty cool pamphlet. Anyway, I just wanted to share it with you. I won't bore you again with my closing, but just remember, it's later than you think. So try to have a good time. I'm gonna go now in my inebriated state and try to tackle some more of my Lego typewriter. What I don't know is where I'm gonna put this. Maybe I'll take it to Kip, put it on a shelf there. I don't know, we'll see. Anyway, thanks for watching, take care, have a good night.